All right, can you guys see that?
Yes, sir.
Cool. Well, welcome everyone to tonight's educational forum on vocational rehabilitation services. Thank you all for coming. This is a continuation of organ spinal cord injury connections, ongoing sessions of educational forums. Tonight's forum will be recorded for our community members that couldn't attend. And please do not share any personal information that you aren't comfortable with being recorded. We'd like everyone to know this is a safe space to share and ask questions, so please respect others' opinions and experiences. We have a small group, so I'm not really worried about us all staying muted during the presentation, but we'll get through this slideshow and then start having some good human conversation. And with that, I would like to introduce you all to tonight's guest speaker, Teddy. And Teddy, I'll let you introduce yourself and take over.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name's Teddy Walston. I am the branch manager for the Southern Oregon branch of Vocational Rehabilitation. And I've been in this role officially for 7 months or so. Before that, I was a VR counselor for about 10 years. So excited to be here, excited to share some information and then have just some organic discussion. Cool. So tonight we'll just go over VR, a little bit of the history of it, talk a little bit about the types of services that potentially will be provided, and then also how individuals can go about getting in contact with VR. So vocational rehabilitation, people don't realize it, but it's actually more than 100 years old. Initially, it was put in place to serve veterans who were returning home and were injured at war or during their time of service, and they needed a way to not only recover from their injuries, but adapt to newfound disabilities and re-enter into the workforce. Since then, state vocational rehabilitation has morphed a little bit, and we serve more of the general population or civilian population because the VA has their own division of vocational rehabilitation or segment of VR. But still, the roots are helping individuals with disabilities overcome their barriers to employment, to find and maintain employment. We can go to the next slide. So again, our mission is to assist Oregonians with disabilities to achieve and maintain and advance in employment and increase independence. We believe that every Oregonian with the desire to work should have the full opportunity to work, right? I know tons of individuals with disabilities with a boatload of potential, but they just haven't received that opportunity, right? A little bit about my personal story. I was born with cerebral palsy. I've uh, used a motorized wheelchair from the age 5 on. I actually never went to school with able-bodied persons. I went to a special school that was called a special school. Probably shouldn't use that terminology anymore, but I have a hard time keeping up with all the terminology of today. So I went to a school that was called the Henry Viscardi School. It was designed for individuals who experience physical challenges. And I went there from the time I started first grade all the way through high school. And the interesting thing that I found with some of my friends that have had that experience is I have a bunch of friends who have more degrees than they do employment opportunities, right? So this to me is a like Voc Rehab, and the journey of Voc Rehab is very personal to me. I remember distinctly, I was in, I want to say, ninth grade or 10th grade, and people were hanging out by the lockers as you typically do in high school, right? Hang out by the lockers and talk crap, right? And I heard a person, some of the older guys, they may have been juniors or seniors, talk about, oh man, I'll crap next year, I'll be 18. I'm gonna get my own SSI check, right? I'm gonna get my SSI check. It's gonna be on, right? Like I'm gonna have my own money, like saying all the ways it was gonna change their life. And I'm like, they were so excited. I had to find out. I'm like, how much money is like an SSI check? And this is like back in, I want to say, mid-90s. And they said something about like, oh, it'll be like $300-400 a month. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what the hell would a person do with $300 or $400 a month? And from that moment on, I was committed to like having a life beyond a Social Security check. So I think that's what motivates me. I want persons with disabilities to uh, be able to maximize their potential, right? And achieve the things that they know they can achieve with the right supports. And that's our mission. That's how we go about our daily work from the VR counseling perspective, is helping an individual maximize. So that's what this conversation is about moving forward. Next slide. So vocational rehabilitation, we are under uh, the Department of Human Services. So some of our partner organizations include APD. So for those of you who have like APD case managers, um, we also work alongside child welfare in some cases, the Oregon Developmental Disability Services, etc. So again, we're under the Department of Human Services on the state level, and then the on the federal level, we're a part under the Department of Education. So um we we do many different things, man. We provide direct services to clients. We also provide services to businesses and partner organizations. We can uh, perform trainings on service equity, communication, um, policies and operations. But the 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 lifeblood of VR, I believe, is the connection that the VR counselor makes with the clients, right? Um, all the stuff that we do for businesses, yeah, that helps clients reach their potential. But it all starts with that relationship the VR counselor develops with the client. Okay? All right, we'll go on to the next slide. Excuse me. And my lighting is changing, so I'm gonna get someone to close my blinds for me, but we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So
You want me to pause for a second while you get your blinds closed?
no, keep going. I'm gonna just message my wife and try and see how smooth I can go about it.
No problem.
She's gonna hate being on camera, but that's okay. Go back one slide, Casey. I'm sorry.
No problem at all.
So just real quick, I know we have a small group. How many of you in this forum today have had some experience with vocational rehabilitation? You can raise your hand
Present.
The thumbs up. Yeah, cool. So we're a governmental system, so we have processes, steps, um, and it's not always the fastest process, but I'm gonna explain to you a little bit as to why, right? Um, and we're working on things to speed that up. But for anyone who is interested in going to work, or anyone who's interested in exploring work, um, you have to first apply, and every Oregonian has the right to apply. However, in order to be eligible for vocational rehabilitation services, you have to have a documented disability that creates a barrier to employment. That's the criteria for eligibility. We look at multiple things, right? It's not just what does your doctor say, right? Yes, we do need a doctor to confirm some things, but the counselor and client need to really dig into um what is that individual's experience. Because like in my case, not cerebral palsy doesn't impact everyone the same, just as a spinal cord injury doesn't impact everyone the same. So your eligibility process should not be a cookie cutter one. It should really be about um you explaining to that VRC how exactly the whatever your impediment is impacts you, right? Uh, so from the time you apply, we actually have 60 days to determine your eligibility for services. Um, uh, it doesn't typically take us 60 days, but we're using that 60 days to have those discussions with you about your disability and about the things revealed to us within your medical records, right? Um, And then from there, if you're determined eligible, we have 90 days to write a plan. Again, some plans we can write in a few weeks. Other plans actually take 90 days, maybe even longer. But through that time, you should be consistently meeting with your counselor to discuss the things that you need to obtain your employment goal. It's not really up to your counselor to determine your vocational goal in a vacuum. I encourage individuals to come up with some ideas about things that they might want to do. All right. A lot of times you have individuals who um uh it's last minute and they just figured out, oh, I want to go to voc rehab. I'm not sure what I want to do, and that's okay. But um it is a smoother process when you take the time to foster a goal and explore. And we can get more into how one would go about doing that um, after the slideshow. Okay. So as the plan is developed, we decide on the services that one would need to obtain the employment goal. And again, it's all individualized. For some individuals, it might be they just need training. For other individuals, it may be they need a job developer or someone to go out and help them execute their job search. Casey, pause that for a second. I'm gonna hop off camera just to make sure somebody comes and helps me fix the lighting because right now I just look like a head. So I want to fix that.
No problem. Yeah, take your time.
It's a good look, Teddy.
That sounds like blinding. All right, much better.
All right, we're back. Cool. As much as I love the sun, don't really want to have to throw on my shades for the rest of this presentation. So again, services are individualized. We should not be having like cookie cutter plans, right? The services need to be pointed to your disability or your barrier and how each individual service is going to, help you overcome or mitigate the barrier. So I would not expect any plan in this room for one person to be identical to another person's plan. It should be customized. Okay. VR will stick with you until you have been employed and received whichever services for that you require. We will stick with you for at least 90 days after you've achieved employment, right? So say you have a plan and it takes us 6 months to find you a job, which is not unreasonable. We will stick with you for at least 3 months after that to make sure you are stable in your employment before we close your file. Some things that we will do, it include like if you are receiving SSI or SSDI, we will refer you to the work incentive network so that we don't compromise your benefits. The work incentive network, their job is to help individuals who are receiving state and federal benefits understand their rights and responsibilities as it relates to those benefits. So, for example, if you go to work and you're receiving SSI, the work incentive network will help you understand this is how work is going to impact your Social Security and help to protect much needed benefits like long-term medical coverage and things like that. So the vocational rehabilitation is not designed to be a lifelong service. However, we are available throughout the life of your employment, right? Or throughout your working life. So say you find a job and it's working well and we close your file, right? Awesome. If in a year or two you find that some barriers come about, right? You can always apply again and re-engage and we can address those newfound barriers, right? So our goal is not to just get you placed and kick you out the door, but make sure that you're in a position to maximize your potential as an individual. Before I keep going on, does anyone have any questions on any of that?
I do have some questions.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, 60 days, is that calendar days or business days or how many, what kind of days are those?
So that's calendar days.
Okay, so 60 calendar days or 90 calendar days. And
Yeah.
then, because I've had VR services in the past
Mm-hmm.
and already been determined eligible. So would it still would I have to start over from the very beginning again if I wanted to re-engage with VR?
So I would say yes, you do from like a paperwork standpoint, right? We have to verify certain things like current ID and all those things. But if it has been relatively recent, we may be able to your process may move a little bit faster because we may still have records on file that we could use to progress the process, right?
Okay, yeah.
So yes, it is a restart. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. However, the knowledge gained from your previous file, if it was documented, could help to move that along. And again, our goal as an agency is to not necessarily to expedite, but it's to engage people faster than what the Fed requires. So while we have up to 60 days to determine eligibility, ideally we would be doing that much faster, right? And some things that you could do to maybe help accelerate that, right? If you have sometimes we get a copy of reports from our medical providers, whether it be from physical therapists or counselors or whatever. If you have that, if you have access to my chart and you can print out some things that might be a good guide, it's not a problem to advocate for yourself in that way and bring some documentation to your appointment and just say, I hope this would help. So,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
any other questions? Cool.
And this is just, sorry, Teddy,
Yeah.
I gotta go off camera. Is it for like anything that like helps you in the field? Like what kind of services, I guess?
Oh man. So it's hard to say like what kind of services there because again because it's so individualized. You know, I mean, I've done everything from help people purchase assistive technology like drag and dictate to help with job development services where someone goes out to help you find employment, right? Say you can safely ambulate, right? But you have like anxiety when you're meeting new people, and that is making it really difficult for you to execute a job search, right? We can actually contract an individual to help work with you one-on-one to do some of those introductions with employers. So I've done everything from purchase work clothes, assistive technology of all types to modified vehicles, right? It just depends on the circumstances. I would say nothing's out of bounds, and if it is out of bounds, it's incumbent upon the VR counselor to be able to explain why. There are some things that I personally have said no to, right? But I'll make sure that my clients know where the no is coming from. And usually the no is not about me, the VR counselor, making a judgment call. Usually the no is tied to a federal or state regulation, right? So for example, we can't pay for any debts, fines, credit card bills, anything like that. Any medical bills or things that an individual has obtained before coming into a VR plan, like things like that, we can't say no to. But I think everything else is open for discussion.
Gotcha. Cool.
You
Thanks
know?
for clarification.
Yeah, it's one of the things is like people will ask, well, what am I eligible for? Really, you're eligible for anything that would help mitigate a barrier to employment, unless it violates a state or federal, code, right? And the VR counselor should be able to explain their rationale for whatever no, and I think VR is more of a just as an agency, I think we take a stance of more of a we say yes until an individual gives us a clear-cut reason to say no, right? And that's one of the things I love about the agency. Okay. Is y'all know, is that the last slide?
Nope.
Okay. So again, this goes into more of like how we go about determining eligibility, right? So we look at, these are some areas that we can look at, right? We can look at your communication abilities, your interpersonal skills, your mobility, your self-care, your ability to self-direct, or your need for coaching or on-the-job supports. We look at what are your work skills. I'm gonna try and shift the rest of the discussion. I've been doing it a little bit more general, but I'll talk more specifically about if someone has a significant mobility challenge or spinal cord injury. So we might look at like, is this a newer injury, right? Does the individual need some support adjusting to their newfound limitations? And what does that look like? What did they do before? What skills do they have that are transferable? And what skills do they have that they can no longer maximize? And is there a way for us to train them to do something different? Right? And this is why it becomes very personal to that individual's experience, right? Because our limitations are all different. Even if we experience a similar injury, the way that we adapt to that injury may impact, our eligibility determination and thus the services that we need to obtain our employment, right? And again, everything is also all VR services are driven by two things. I would say driven by the disability, but then also what's the goal? What's the desired employment outcome, right? We have to eventually get to a point where we have a goal and then we work our way backwards. Okay, this is the goal, and how do we get there, right? So, yeah, that's that in a nutshell. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. These are things that we take into consideration when we're developing your plan for employment. What are your interests, right? What are your priorities? What are your abilities, strengths? What are your transferable skills? This is where, like I say, like this is where you start driving the ship, right? Because there are a lot of things a VR counselor is not gonna know unless you start telling them. So you have to be able and willing to tell your story, right? So that we can decide what is appropriate vocational goal for you. One of the things that the VR counselor should be doing is kind of, once we look at that goal, like not every, I should say this, not every goal is reasonable or appropriate, right? If there is no labor market, right? If you want to be a rocket scientist and you want to work in Oregon, right? Like we might be like, yes, you have the intellectual capability, but there's no job market for that. Like we can't identify that. So unless we can identify a job market for the goal that you're selecting, it's probably gonna get rejected, by the VRC. If that makes sense.
Yes.
And even at that point, right? You say, I really want to be a rocket scientist. I know you're saying there's no labor market, but I'm gonna prove you wrong. Like, then it's Elsa, right? For example, Elsa comes into the VR office like, yeah, I've been to VR 2 times and it wasn't the right goal for me. And now I know, like, I want to be a rocket scientist. And the VR counselor says, I don't think there's a job market for that in the gorge, right? Or wherever you are, right? That's where you can still come back and say, VR counselor, there is a labor market and I've researched it, right? Right? So this is where we exercise those self-advocacy skills to show like, hey, I've thought about this goal. This is why it makes sense for me. All right? Because let's be honest, the world is not designed to fit people with significant disabilities, right? It's just not designed that way, right? So we have to be aggressive, like we have to think ahead and we have to plan and be willing to advocate for ourselves. So yeah, and that's what the plan development process is all about. Okay.
Hetty, how did you know I wanted to be a rocket scientist?
I could just tell. I looked in your eyes and I'm like, that looks like a rocket scientist to me. Yeah.
You want the next slide?
Okay. Yeah. So so why don't we just open this up? Why don't we start just opening this up for any discussion or questions that anyone has? Um
That's all.
or
I have a question. So
mhm.
for somebody that has maybe heard of Voc Rehab or maybe not heard of them, but is like really interested, but just not sure what they want to do, or just really nervous about getting back in the workforce, like what's the
Yeah.
best advice you could give?
I mean, so here's the thing. You have to first believe that you can do it, right? It's the same like transferring into your wheelchair for the first time or driving or whatever the case may be, right? If you are full of doubts about yourself and your capability, the first step is to work on that self-doubt, right? And recognize, hey, this self-doubt is a thing for me and I need to work through that, but I'm also going to need help working through that. And you can name that to your as you go to your intake appointment or you're applying, right? So like, I really think I want to go to work, but honestly, I have this self-doubt that keeps creeping in about what I could do in my new body that I may like or may not like at this point, right? So first step is just to be honest with yourself about where you are in that journey, in that process, and that's with everything in life. Like first step is always self awareness and honesty, and that might be uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions or thoughts, please just feel free to unmute or.
Yeah.
Is there ever a timeline for like if you've been out of the work field and SSI, like you're on SSI, like coming out of that, going back into the work field? Is there ever any timeline for that to not take place?
When you say like so in other words, do you mean like if you go on Social Security and then
Yeah, like if I was just
okay.
say this is all metaphorical, but basically
Yeah.
like if I was on disability for 10 years because of my injury, and it's
Yeah.
like I'm at the point where it's like I want to do more, I want to get out there, I
Yeah.
want to work again.
Yeah, so good question. No, actually, um, there are first I'll say this, Oregon is a great state. We have a lot of different protections for individuals who have disabilities that are receiving benefits that are unsure about whether or not they they can work or keep their benefits and all that stuff. And one of the things about Social Security, people get confused about Social Security. So I'm also gonna do a little bit of myth busting on that. People think that your eligibility for Social Security is about your disability. It's not. It had nothing to do with, in my opinion, it had nothing to do with your disability and everything to do with Social Security acknowledging, hey, this person, we don't believe that this person has the ability at this point to work independently and support themselves. It's not a disability evaluation. It's a ability to work evaluation, right? So that's why you'll see plenty of people that with disabilities that get denied for Social Security repeatedly because Social Security is saying, hey, we will acknowledge that you have this, but we don't believe it's limiting you to this level, right? So for an individual to be eligible for Social Security, we have they have to be able to show it's limiting them at such a significant level that they can't work at a substantial level. So once you are eligible for SSI or SSDI, that's Social Security's acknowledgement of your limitation. But they also secretly they tell with rehab like, hey, if you can, we will do anything in our power to support you in getting this person back to work and getting them off our rolls, right? So no, there's no time frame. Social Security will actually encourage you to reach out to vocational rehabilitation through a program called the Ticket to Work. So no time frame. At any point in a person's career or lifespan, they can come back to work. I think my largest gap between when an individual left work due to a disability and when they returned was about 35 years. I had a person with a neurological condition that caused them to leave the workforce. Sorry, my eyes give me some issues for some reason. I had an individual leave the workforce at about the age of 32, 35 due to a neurological condition. And they actually met me one day when like, wow, you're working? You think I could work? And I'm like, absolutely, you can work. And they applied for services, and at 70, they went back to work. So there was a 35-year gap from when they left the workforce to when they re-entered. And that was with the support of Voc Rehab. And they had some talents that an employer could use. So yeah, there's
Obviously,
no
that's probably
gap.
huge in your mental health too.
Yeah, totally. Totally. But imagine that you leave work at 35 and you don't return till 70.
Yeah,
That's different level stuff.
being alive, if you've been alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Teddy, what if someone's individual plan has to do around like their goal for seeking employment requires some education or trainings in there? Is that something that they could come in for?
Um, Absolutely, that is something that an individual can come and it's not guaranteeing that we will fund it, but we may help an individual like navigate the financial aid process or you just explore different avenues. But absolutely, if training is required to reach the most appropriate employment outcome, yeah, we can definitely support training. Personally, I have supported um training at all levels. I've done, you know, I've sent youth to Job Corps. I've sent individuals who needed to upskill to advance in their employment. I've sent them to um, you know, 40-hour trainings and peer support or upskilling them as drug and alcohol counseling. I've got helped individuals with associate's degrees and even, bachelor degrees and beyond. So that is not out of the realm of possibility. What I would say is first we need to identify the goal. Second, we identify the barriers to the goal. And if a lack of training is a barrier to reaching that agreed upon employment outcome, then sure, we consider training. My um, personal preference is some form of on the job training or apprenticeships. Because what I've found is that people with disabilities, like school is so safe, honestly, bro. School is the safest thing you could do. Like they will always accept you and they will as long as you can pay, school is unlike the rest of the world for individuals with disabilities, right? School will accept you as long as you can figure out a way to fork over the tuition. So a lot of times, uh, people go to school as a refuge from the challenges of being rejected by the competitive workforce, if that makes sense, right? Like, man, I've been rejected this many times. I'm gonna just go to school. And when I get a degree, like, then they're gonna love me. Then they're gonna look past the disability because they're gonna see my degree and it's gonna be all better. And I would say, like, we never want to go to training or school or anything like that because of feelings of inadequacy, right? Those feelings of inadequacy are different. Like as person with a disability, I believe we need to address those feelings separate from our vocational path. Now, if we identify that an individual that we need training to access the job market, that is different. But it's like, if you're saying I'm gonna go to school and then they'll accept me, you're going to be disappointed because you'll never feel that unless you start addressing what else is going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. And then also, what about an individual that is more interested in like starting their own business?
Self, man, self-employment is one of those things that like I think it can be considered, and I mean it should be considered. There are just so many factors. Um I'll tell you, like our processes, the voc rehab processes around self-employment have been changing and changing significantly. I think if an individual has an idea for how they can be self-employed and it's the best path for them to reach their employment outcome, then it can be considered, and self-employment is something that we can do. However, traditional employment is, yeah, honestly, for lack of a better term, it is a lot easier. So I would tend as a VR counselor to look at what are some adjacent careers that we can look at that might generate more stability.
Would it be better to like have said individual like try and find a job or an employer and
Yeah.
then reach out to Voc Rehab for like establishing like work from home situation?
Yeah, so yeah, that I mean, I personally would be more comfortable with that. I don't because this is going to be shown to a variety of people. I don't want to come across as if I'm
Right.
I'm anti self-employment. Like I'm not. I just know self-employment comes with a lot of things, and when you have a significant disability and you may have SSI or SDI, there are a lot of different factors that you need to consider as it relates to self-employment. But if we have an employment goal that we agree upon, and we understand that self-employment is the best route for you to get there and maintain your employment, absolutely, it's something that can and should be considered. So
Yeah, and it was more, I guess my comment was more of along the lines of just knowing the disabled community. Sometimes it's the little things, you know, like payroll and all that stuff. It could be the things that you're not thinking about, although it looks good
right.
on paper. It's just it's more of a job. It's like 10 jobs wrapped into one rather than just having your own.
Right, it is. And again, you have to it's like the same thing I said about post-secondary education, right? Or college. Not anti it, but are you choosing are you trying to be self-employed because you grasping at straws and you've been in a spot where you don't feel as if you have been or will be accepted by the general population in the competitive job market. If that is the case, like we can work on that to build that confidence to help you satisfy that thing. So that's not the issue. The issue then becomes is self-employment the best route? And I've had like a couple of self-employment clients, right? Because it did prove for them to be the best route to become employed. And we've supported a variety of businesses. So definitely not anti self-employment. We want to make sure that we're choosing self-employment for the right reasons. And we have, like you brought up, Cody, the capacity to address all of the things like how are we gonna pay the taxes? Do we have a appropriate tax person? How is that gonna impact my benefits, right? Um, all of those things. So I think self-employment should never be off the table.
Thank you.
Cool.
I'd like to know, oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
go ahead, please.
I was wondering, so I'm in the VR process right now.
Yeah.
Somewhere in, one of those stages.
Yeah.
I think I'm about to go into like a work study or whatever that term was. And I'm wondering,
Okay.
how can I, as a client, demonstrate like my need for a barrier to be addressed, a barrier to employment to be addressed? Like, is there a way I can demonstrate that I really need a Rolls Royce to get this job? Like, or I need a grant.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, um, I I think it all comes down to um if you have, and I'm gonna be really careful because you
Yeah.
have an open file, right? I'm gonna
Sure.
respect the process,
Sure.
respect
Yeah.
you and the counselor. What I am gonna say though is um you have to, I think your services should be driven by the goal, right?
Right.
Because you might say like I need, for example, let's say you might say I need a motorized chair, right? Let's throw that out there as something, right? Say like you have a chair that was paid for by insurance and they're not gonna pay another one for 5 years, and you're like, I'm in this manual chair and this ain't working for me. It's not gonna be a reliable option for me moving forward if I'm gonna be working at a competitive rate, you know? Depending on what your goal is, like let's say for example, your goal is you're gonna be working at you're gonna be doing IT and your goal is to work at home. Like me as a VR counselor, I might question like, well, do you really need the motorized chair because your manual chair with your push assist is graded for at-home use, right? So that's where your goal, the goal that you select, and your path to reaching the goal should drive the services. Now, depending on where you are in the process, you might not have a goal selected, so therefore it's difficult to say exactly what the barriers are. Everything else is just like spaghetti at the wall, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I think that clears it up.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing, and that's why it's so important for clients to identify what their goals are, or if they're having trouble identifying their goal, lean into that VRC for their counseling guidance expertise. And then once you select that goal, things will become clearer. Like I always say, the job of the VR counselor is to help the client starts at the starting line, right? And then as a VR counselor, we have to run to the finish line and then look backwards and then see, okay, what is the most efficient way to get this individual to the finish line, whatever that is. And that the finish line is the employment goal. So that's why it's so important for us to identify the goal, and then start looking backwards and say, okay, what are the steps to get there?
And just a piece of guidance for you, Koa. Like I'm gonna go back on what Teddy said in the beginning, but like if there's something specific that you're thinking you're needing, be very specific about it. Like think
Yeah.
it through. Like, if you're needing a power chair, not only do you need a power chair, but do you need a power chair that elevates, that would get you to higher areas, things that you can reach, things that you can do. You got to start thinking in that mindset. It's like, although motors would be significantly better for you to get you somewhere, what would benefit you in the workforce?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think about it this way. So for an individual to drive, right? We said, for an individual to drive, how many steps is it for you to drive? So a able-bodied person or a typically functioning person would be like, okay, there's a few steps. I get up, I walk out the door, I open the door, and I hop in my seat, I pull my keys out my hand, I plug them in the ignition, and I go, right? That's not how it works for us. We know, like, that's not how it works for us, right? So we have to go and identify those micro steps, right? Like, what are the steps in between the steps that the average individual has to take that we need to consider? So, like Cody was saying, how we need to think beyond the surface is exactly right. It's like, what do you need, right? Let's go with the example of the wheelchair, right? Break that down like into the smallest step and say, like, this is the issue. This is what I feel like is a barrier. And when you think you have enough detail, you don't. Add more, right? Because that's how we have to live out our lives, unfortunately, right? We have to think out every single thing. And the more you think out as a client, the easier it becomes for the VRC to create that rationale for something that they may have never done before. Not every VRC has brought a prosthetic, right? Not every VRC has authorized the purchase of a wheelchair. Not every VRC has, done all these things, wrote a plan for someone to receive their bachelor's degree. So there might be a little bit of apprehension from that professional. So the more detail you give them, the easier it is for them to get behind, see the vision, and also have the confidence to execute the plan that you know you need. So the more detail, the better.
So
Yeah.
what's the very first step, I guess, Teddy, with starting with vocational rehab?
Yeah. So the very first step is deciding that you want to go to work. And then I put uh I could have listed every office, but that becomes cumbersome. So this last slide has a link, and maybe Casey, you can put that in the chat.
Yes.
The last slide has a link, and that on that link has a page that will take you will help you find your local office, and you can contact them and schedule a intake appointment. Some offices have orientation, some have one-on-ones. So it just depends. But I would say the first step is to reach out to your local office, and then once you get in the room with that counselors, explain where you're coming from, where you're at in your journey, right? I
Can,
see
can
a
I,
hand raised.
can I add something real quick? So I learned the hard way, kinda, that
Yeah.
you don't have to stay with your local office. If it's not working for you, you can request a change to a different VR
Yeah.
counselor.
Yeah. And I will say if a counselor client relationship isn't working for you, that's okay. Be honest with that, right? Be okay. It's not, you're not making a value judgment on that counselor and their who they are as a person or a professional. You're just saying that this is not working for me, right? And that's all right. We must be comfortable doing that. Yeah. Awesome. Good point, Elsa. Thank you. Victor, I saw you had your hand raised. Did you have
Yeah,
a question or a comment?
yeah, I was just asking, like, maybe
Yeah.
what everyone's thinking, like, what do you advise? Because my main goal would probably, one of the main goals is in the goals, like what you're talking about is like to drive, So what do you
Yeah.
think I advise to do is would be the best job or
Yeah.
like to get to that point to because I wouldn't even care almost, whatever job it would be, just as long as I could drive and do that, get out there and do it. Like even it would even help if I had an employer that already like a job lined up, like even if it was like a flagger for the loggers, and just be
Yeah.
accessible truck and just me driving, like that would
Yeah.
be like a cool job, not like a major goal, but like a cool job that I would like just to get to me that main goal of driving,
All right.
and then from there maybe changing the job. I don't know if you can do that.
Cool. So, a couple of things. Great question. And let's be honest, right? Like, driving is a major goal for everybody, right? For particularly for those that have driven and then have an injury, and that has been, that ability has been taken away from them, or they don't have access to the hand controls and stuff like that, right? So let's talk about that. The service is I can't give you a recipe of this is how you go to your VSC and this is what you say so that they will then buy the hand controls necessary for you to get the vehicle for you to drive. Like I can't do that. And here's why I can't do that. And don't worry, I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm just laying the foundation. So the services are designed. The services should address a barrier to employment, right? So, if you pick a goal and we decide like we have to first decide that the goal is appropriate, and that's a team decision, and then we identify the services required for you to find or maintain that goal. So until the counselor gets more of your story,
Yeah.
and more of your more of your rationale for the vehicle, like there's no way to say, right? What I will say is VR cannot um uh, VR cannot just like you can't pick a goal, right? Like you can't say, I want VR to help me buy a vehicle. So I'm gonna say that my goal is to be a pizza delivery person, right?
Yeah.
Because you need a delivery vehicle to drive like you know,
That's what I was
deliver
asking. Like
pizza.
would a good goal be like,
Yeah.
because my last job was at a pole yard, and I would have a job almost lined up, but it would be cool just to be a flagger, and
Mm-hmm.
well, it'd be, you would need a probably accessible truck or something like that. But like I'm saying, is that too much of a simple goal, like for them to act on, for that much
So
of expense, I guess you could say.
um I would say no goal is too simple or too complex. We would have to um again, it's challenging, right? Because I know like the goal is not, we have to make sure that I'm trying to be so careful because I don't want to mislead you, right?
Oh yeah, you're fine. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't want you to hear something and be like, oh, this is the recipe, because I don't know. What I
Oh
do
yeah.
know is
I'm gonna
that
tell
you
her
have,
when Teddy Watson told me this.
right, exactly. And look, I got the video evidence, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's gonna be clear. You have like the video evidence. So
Mhm.
what I'll say is, if your goal is to get to work, right? If you have to be honest and be like, is my goal more so to drive, or is my goal to go to work and I need to drive to get to work? Like,
Yeah,
right?
it's like both, it's like on the way, like that's one of
Yeah.
the steps. Yeah.
So so and I think if the goal is more to drive and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna just be frank. If you're using like, I want to work as a way to get the vehicle or the hand controls, that ain't gonna work. But
Yeah.
if you have a goal that's really like, this is what I want to do, and this is a freaking obstacle for me, and you can show that, then it's open for exploration. Well, I just think there needs to be a level of honesty about
Of course.
what is in the forefront, right? Because if it is about like, I just want to drive, I don't care what kind of job it is, that's gonna come out in a while. That's gonna come out and the plan's gonna fall apart. So
Mhm.
I would say for you, my advice would be like, let's really figure out what it is that you want to do, and is driving really a barrier to what you want to do long term, right?
Mhm.
And then like that makes it a richer conversation, even if you're honest to the even if you go into the appointment and you're honest with the VFC. It's like there is a part of me that wants to work. Yeah, like that's 35% of it. I want to work. But
Yeah.
like the other part is, I heard that you guys fund vans, and I
Mhm.
really want to figure out a way for me to get my hand controls on my van or whatever the case may be. Like just that honesty will help like sustain the conversation, and then hopefully that'll evolve to where it's like you would want to maybe, okay, once you start seeing a plan in motion, you're like, oh yeah, I do want to drive, but now I'm getting more intrigued about whatever this goal is, right?
Mhm.
So I would just say be honest about your intentions, and like in my experience, like I've had individuals that have only wanted to drive, and I knew that their goal wasn't really to go to work. And as
Mhm.
much as I love the community and I will do whatever to fight for the community, um, I rejected that. I rejected that person's request because I'm like, the goal is not really to go to work, and we're gonna get that van, and they're not gonna go to work. Their life is gonna be enriched and changed, and I would feel pleased by that. But I'll also be like, dang, they didn't go to work. And our intention at Voc
Yeah.
Rehab is to
Mhm.
put people to work. So just be honest. And let's focus on finding a goal that really works for you. And then if driving or your inability to drive is a real big thing, then that conversation is that much richer. Does that
Oh,
make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
Again,
like how you word, like basically
yeah,
my goal is to work. I don't want to get a vehicle and then not work at my, like, I guess you could say my goal is to have a working job driving. So like
yeah,
and then I almost, doesn't matter what kind of job it is. Almost that I do want to work. That's the main thing. My main goal is to work to get money. For my family. But
for
it
sure.
would be awesome. The main goal is a driving job. But,
For for sure. So, and I think uh and a, and again, if your main goal is a driving job, like the way our policy is currently um phrased, uh we would be guided to say, um we got to say, let's look at some other careers. Because if that was the case, bro, honestly, then everybody would say, my goal is to work for myself, and I want to be an Uber driver. Is that gonna work? Can you give me a van? And like
yeah,
everybody
sure.
and their mama could be Uber drivers, and
Mhm.
then like you know, that would
Oh
be
yeah, yeah.
another thing in itself. So I would say driving can't at this point, I
Mhm.
wouldn't make driving the focus of the job. I would focus on like
Make
what
it more
is the type.
personal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
make it more personal. Try and figure out like, and you could even be honest about this conversation too. Like when
Mhm.
you go to your appointment, you say like, I went to a forum and I spoke with Teddy, and well, Teddy was presenting, and these are kind of the things that he said, and like and talked about it from that very real place. Like driving would change my life, and so would work. And I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out like how to
Absolutely.
balance both because they're both meaningful, right? I don't
Yeah.
want you to feel shut down in any way by this conversation, but like the focus
Yeah.
has to be the job, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, thank you. And
Cool.
then that's why I wanted to be is totally, honest and open and not trying to hide what I'm
No,
trying to be. I'm trying to be honest completely. And
no, man, I
thank you.
respect
Yeah.
it. I
Yeah.
respect it. Hey, Cody, I see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, unmuted here. Yeah, man, I just had a quick question, like much like Victor,
Mhm.
we come from those harder type careers. Like with me, it was an electrician. For Victor, it's the logging field. But my question is there anything like if you're hoping to get back in the same field, obviously we gotta like adjust kind of what we can do. But is there anything that's like that sounds like too much? You know what I mean? Like I'm sure VR wouldn't sign me up to like, hey, I need a new screwdriver set so I can go put it into 2,000 volts and
Yeah.
not slip and like, you
So
know what I mean, with a
yeah.
disability.
I mean, I mean, again, I think like if
Probably
we're
individual
eh,
based.
yeah, it's individual. I would say nothing is too much. If you and your VR counselor can make a case for it, there's a labor market to support it and a discipline related need to address, I think the VR team would explore it. Like, this was not
Maybe I need
my
to go back and say like, hey, I can still drive a fire engine. Like I can still be a firefighter. Like you just gotta buy me a fire engine.
right. And then we have those discussions, right? Like, what is real? What is sustain? But really, like, everything is fodder for the fire, or everything is like these individuals that you're going to be talking to and telling your personal business to, they're supposed to be counselors, right? So as you have these conversations, they're supposed to be able to help you break them down and be like, okay, so Cody, you were an electrician, right? That was the yeah. I'm on the camera right now, bro. What? Um. So, yeah, full-time work, full-time dad. You know how it is. So, but yeah. So, uh, you have to have that conversation of like, these are my transferable skills, right? I am at a stuck place. I don't know how to translate these skills into a job that fits my newfound body, right? Like that's what voc rehab is there for. So I think at that point, nothing is too big or too small, because if it truly is like this dude, like this is what he knows, he's an electrician, like we gotta figure out a way to use those skills or develop new ones. And what's going to be more efficient? Probably finding a way to use those skills, right? Um, so I would say nothing's too big, and fight to develop a rationale for it.
Gotcha.
Elsa, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, thank you, Casey.
Yeah, so I have a job, but I don't actually start until August at this job
okay.
that I'm about to
Awesome.
start. And I don't know if I'm gonna need VR support or not. Because I do know I just got a new wheelchair.
Yeah.
And my old chair fit under the desk at my old job, but my new chair does not fit under the desk, and it's probably not going to fit under the desk at my new job either.
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah.
is potentially a barrier.
Yeah.
But then I also don't know what other barriers there might be when I
Yeah.
start this new job in August. And so I'm wondering, like, would it make sense for me to reach out to VR now, not having really any clear idea what my needs might be,
Yeah.
or would I wait until I know?
So, first, okay, this is where I sound oh real counselor-esque, but what do you, based on my messaging so far, what do you think?
Well, I'm kind of feeling like, for timing wise, I might want to go ahead and get in the door and
Yeah,
get that process started.
yeah. Because if you don't need us, you don't need us. But the thing that you don't want to do is like need us, and then you're like, shit, I gotta wait 30 days for an intake, and
Right.
then I gotta wait for them to find me eligible, and then I gotta wait for a plan. Like you
Yeah,
know,
because
you
if the desk thing might not even be a thing, my new employer might be like, yeah, we'll get you risers, no big deal. Or they might not, and I don't know.
but like you've been through this rodeo before with voc rehab, right? Like
Yeah.
so the time frames, any potential delays are not a surprise to you. You know it's a very real potential. So why? Like why put off? Like why put off applying? It's like
Yeah.
my thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I'm gonna take
All
that
right.
nugget, and I'm gonna fill out the forms.
Yeah,
Congratulations. Enjoy it.
yeah. Congratulations on the new job. Nothing like excites me like a new job. Like I love um seeing that people getting that first paycheck in a long time. Like feeling that sense of like contribution, even though like there are ways for persons with disabilities to contribute to the world that does not necessarily have to be quantified in a paycheck, right? So I don't want anyone who is not ready to work or feels like they're unable to work to feel like less than, because we can contribute in a variety of ways. With that said, I do personally know the value of work for me and for the others in this room. So like salute to you and your new job. Hopefully, can I ask what you'll be doing? Is that too nosy?
No, and I've been continuously employed, but I've been able to maintain my current employment because of services with Voc Rehab. But I'm actually a speech therapist, and so
Awesome.
yeah, so I work in schools, and so summer is happening now, and my new chair came like the last week of school, and I spent the whole last week of school not fitting under any of my desks anywhere, which was very uncomfortable and difficult. And so when I go to my new school district in August, I would hope not to have to deal with that, at least for not very long.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I mean, because you have that experience with Voc Rehab, you know how to navigate and advocate and do those things, but you know the importance of like doing that in a timely fashion. So I'm glad you took the clue and said that you'll go ahead and get on that. Good luck to you.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
yeah,
Kenny, so, our organ spinal cord injury connection, we serve
yeah,
the spinal cord injury and greater physical disability community. And I know
yeah,
every plan is very individual, but for people with physical disabilities,
yeah.
have you seen any trends in the workplace or trends out there that for somebody that's just like got that drive to work, but they're not quite sure what they
Yeah.
want to do?
Yeah. So, um, so like here's my struggle, bro. Like we all like I want all persons with disability to succeed, but I know what makes my heart sing is when I know that person with significant physical limitations is out there doing their thing, right? It doesn't mean like I say that like there's no disability Olympics, right? Hey, you're a C5, you get like a gold medal, you got TP, you get a bronze, right? Like it's not like that.
Yeah.
So, but I do, like I'm very passionate about those with like physical disability and what I am disappointed about in the greater Oregon is like I just don't see us out in the community enough, right? Um, I know we're there. I know we have the intellectual capability to thrive and not only thrive individually, but drive our society in a new direction. And I just don't see us out. And that's kind of why I wanted to connect with OSCI is because like we're doing that. We're gathering folks with significant physical limitations and we're getting out in the community and we're being seen, right? The first step to getting a job is getting out of the house, right? Right? You gotta get out of the house and you gotta be seen. So um what I the trend that I see is in Oregon, honestly, is like honestly, I feel like we're in hiding almost. So we got to figure out where our people are, you know, and like knock on their doors. Boom, boom, boom. It's okay to come out because when you come out, we're going to support you. And I think OSCI is doing a great job of building that. And that's what I see. We're not coming out enough. And when we come out, sometimes we're just happy to be out, right? Instead of like, I'm out and I want more, right? Like now that I'm outside, like I want to be outside and I want to do the things. So we have to work with each other and build each other up and build a confidence to be out and be more aggressive about pursuing all the things we want out of life. So we just gotta, like, when we see a individual with a significant disability, and I don't even want to limit it to physical disability, right? When we
Yeah.
see an individual with disability that we believe as human have untapped potential, like, call it out, right? Call it out. Casey, do you mind if I share a little bit of our story? Because I think, like, it's a cool
Absolutely,
one.
man. Yeah, share away.
So I've known of Casey since about, I would say, 2005, right? So like, Casey and I had something in common where we I used to have a stereo connected to my wheelchair, right? Like, and I used to be killing it up and down the street, right? Killing it. So I thought, right? And then my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, said, "Man, you ain't cool. Like, I seen another dude with like a bazooka on the back of his chair, right?" And come to find out, like, it was Casey, right? So, like, I've known of Casey, and we've been crossing paths, off and on for the last, better part of 15 years before, like, I really met him. And then I started with Voc Rehab, a few years prior, because I'm real passionate about people going to work. And Casey was telling me all the wonderful things that he was doing in the community of volunteering. And I'm like, bro, that's great, like, but I always got to know it because I feel like people with disability always get sucked into the volunteer trap, right? Like, always get sucked into, like, yeah, let's do it for the community. Let's feel good. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And there's a part of me that's like, screw that. I'm American. I'm a capitalist. Let's get to the money, right? So I kept, like, talking to Casey, like, bro, you doing all this for the community, but how can we flip it and get you the bag, right? Like, how can we flip it and get you the money? So kept talking off and on, and finally Casey, got really got focused and got some momentum, and look at where he's at now. I'm taking no credit for kind of where you are, bro, because I think you did that based on your own excellence, ingenuity, passion, drive, all that good stuff. But I would like to think, like, me, that occasional push, right? Was like, I can do it. So when you see someone, don't be afraid to stoke that flame in them, right? And I think that's where we go. Like, each one teach one, right? Before you can teach them, you have to reach them. So I say each one reach one, and we pull that person, push that person, stretch that person. Once we reach them, so it goes, each one reach the one, and then once we reach them, then we can teach them, right? And we just have to build that momentum. So again, I think that's the trend. Like, we are now coming together as a community in a way that we haven't, particularly in, Southern Oregon, right? I would say. And I think, like, we owe a lot of that to OSCI and their efforts, but I think, like, making sure that we, as the community grows, we continue to engage. So, I'm an employee of VR, right? And I'm also a manager. So I think it'll be inappropriate for me to reach out to Elsa and be like, "Hey, how's your VR file going?" necessarily. But now that I've met you in this more informal way, like, it's no problem for us to stay connected as people, you know what I mean? And continue to motivate and push each other and establish that familiarity and family, if you will. Sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but like I'm real passionate about us. Like once we connect, stay connected. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I will say, man, I appreciate so much your guidance and you're pushing me to strive for bigger things, man. It
Yeah.
helps me, so thank you.
Yeah. Like, and I always feel like Casey's such a pure dude. Like I always feel like when I talk to him, like I'm corrupting him because I'm always like, how are we gonna get more money, bro? Like you deserve more money. How are we gonna get it? Like I feel like I'm like that little like weirdo always scheming for the money, but I think like this is America, man. Like I don't want to make us feel like um we're a selfish country, but how do people show people they appreciate them in the world of work? Like I don't need an attaboy. I got that from my parents. I get that from the people that are I'm cool with. Like show me the money. So I'm really big on like helping people find like employment where they can meet their needs and like live a life that they deserve. So yeah.
I think it's a great perspective just knowing that and seeing that too, though. It helps people visualize like, hey, don't just be okay with like what we came to get you through. Like think
Yeah.
above that. Think because you can.
Right. Right.
And it might not be
Um,
today, but at some point.
right. It's um for me, I'm always like, and I'm not necessarily money driven. That doesn't move me, right? I heard somebody say once like um money can't buy you happiness, but it sure is the next down payment, right? um and I appreciate that. Like money doesn't buy me happiness, but like in the world of work, that is one of the key ways where individuals show how much they think of you. So I think as persons with disabilities, like our bodies have limitations, but our self-confidence doesn't need to, right? Our egos doesn't need to. You can have a strong ego and have an equally strong heart, right? So I encourage people to build both. Build your ego and your heart because those things are going to carry you through the tough moments.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Kenny.
I'm like, what's
Okay,
up?
you're good, man. I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate your insight and your knowledge and your ego and your heart.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm
All
glad
the time.
somebody appreciates my ego. My wife don't, but it's all good.
I just want to say thank you, and I'm going to stop the recording and then just kind of open this up a little more informal before we close out. I
For
want to
sure.
be mindful of your time.
For sure, man.
1 sec.